I wouldn't recommend eating with a fish. It backs you up like when you believe. Just give you a lot of it too. Oh, hi everyone. Welcome to the Comics and Cinema Club. I'm Matt.
And I'm Drew.
Tonight I decided to take my buddy out to one of my favorite restaurants, one I've been going to since I was a very young fan, the Kaiju fandom. I know this won't stop people from shipping us, but this is the internet and you can't really help that now, can you?
I'd like to leave now.
Get back here.
Oh, I want to get off this ship.
Hey. This is one of my favorite restaurants because I have always been a huge Godzilla fan, and I decided to come back and check it out because fans who come here have been eating pretty damn good recently. Since it finally came in, thanks to the import issues clearing, we finally get to try -1 Kobe steak.
And I can confirm the -1 steak was very good. -1 honestly took us both by surprise because it was a movie like, you walk into a Godzilla movie, you don't really expect that much. You either are going to get an allegory for nuclear warfare, or you're going to get a fun, good old time, basically. But this movie was basically like, hey, let's actually tell a really serious story with Godzilla as like a horror movie monster lurking in the background. And not to mention that this movie, this is how the movie starts story-wise. The story is about a former Japanese pilot who was supposed to be a kamikaze diver bomber at the end of World War II, who loses his nerve, goes to a tiny island to refuel and get repairs when he doesn't really need them because he doesn't want to do it anymore. And then while he's on the island, Godzilla attacks. He goes to shoot it. He loses his nerve again, and his whole crew dies. That is literally like the first 10 minutes of the movie. And from there, it just kicks off, and it's just a whole bunch of fantastic elements and great storytelling from there.
Only joke that we could make when we were watching this is just saying to ourselves, this is a Godzilla movie.
Yeah, we were literally like, usually when we watch these movies, we rant, we banter, we make fun, we poke, we prod, we do all sorts of different things. But this movie, we were just dead silent half the time.
And that's part of this film's like intensity. Like that's an attribute to how freaking phenomenal this film is because with the budget of 10 to 12 million apparently, this film was able to make Godzilla come across as the most threatening and menacing he's ever been. And keep in mind, I know Godzilla. I've grown up with Godzilla. I used to watch all the films. I used to watch Cinemassacre's Monster Madness on Godzilla. I used to be obsessed with him. It was one of my. I don't. I'm not confirmed to be autistic, but I probably do have some autism. And Godzilla was my major obsession. I swear, it was just so freaking phenomenal. It's something about a gigantic lizard fighting other monsters and whatever else just really grabbed me and dragged me in. And if I had this as a little kid, this would be the one I would always keep watching because this is just on par with the 1954 movie as just being the best one. And that's just something that I can just say. I have not been able to say that in a long time. This is as good as the first one. 70 years and it took us to get a film of this quality. 70 years.
Not to mention it took 70 years for us to finally call Godzilla a master of the film, Academy Award winning. Because this movie is the first Godzilla movie to ever win an Academy Award for best visuals or best anything. So
keep in mind he's won Japanese Academy Awards, but this is the first American. Yeah. This is just again a testament to how good this movie is because before it's like with superhero films, he's not usually part of the conversation when it comes to Oscars. That's not really something that's considered. This film is so intense, emotional, and so well put together that it's honestly hard to keep him out of the Oscar conversation because at this film's core, this is kind of like a remake of the first film in a lot of ways, but I feel like a lot of the human elements are much more enunciated, a lot more involved because I swear these human characters, Yoichi and everyone else, they are the most complex human characters since Dr. Serizawa in the first film. And keep in mind, I am usually never able to remember these characters' names across these films because they're always so complicated or even so boring that it's just hard for us to really remember their names. But here, I will never forget Yoichi's story and his struggle. And I really, really, really appreciate that.
Forgetting Walter White though. Walter White was a big character in one of the movies. He was the danger.
Tell me,
no,
Drew. Tell me Walter White's name in that movie. What is his fucking name?
Heisenberg.
No, that's Breaking Bad.
No, it was Heisenberg. Say my name. He's Heisen. No. In all honesty, though, yeah. These characters were by far like the most emotionally captivating and interesting characters you could get because the pilot, it was so like, here's the thing. After Godzilla attacks the island, he's not really in the movie for a good portion. And it's just focusing on this pilot like reintegrating himself into Japan and trying to adjust to life after like Tokyo was bombed and all this stuff happened and a lot of people died. His whole family died. And then he comes across this woman with a child that she promised she was going to raise. And the whole point of the movie, the whole theme that they go for is like moving on and living. Like there's a whole point in the movie where you have to live. You have to keep living. That's the whole point, and it goes so brilliantly against the idea of like kamikaze bombers and everything. Like you have to live. You have to put that behind you. You have to live in a freaking Godzilla movie. And I think that just the greatest thing about the Godzilla fandom to me is that he has such a duality because Godzilla can one second he can be this, he started off as an allegory for nuclear warfare. But one minute he's like running around and destroying cities and doing all this crazy shit. And then the next minute he's leaning back on his tail and flying at a guy to like kick him in the face or doing a little like fist bump and then like, shooting at the ground and blowing himself up into space and doing a whole bunch fighting the giant monkey. I mean, that's why everyone knows him now. He fought and then made friends with the giant monkey.
Like
So
Drew said, Godzilla is a duality, and both different types of films work really well. We've only gotten like a handful of films that take Godzilla extremely seriously, and the vast majority of them are just him fighting another monster and doing cool stuff. And yet, it still works for a whole lot of reasons. And I think beyond the simple fact that monsters fighting each other, that duality is part of what makes Godzilla so fascinating. You really, when you can get those different types of films, you can expect a whole lot of different things from it, and that's something I find so fascinating. When Godzilla fights a big monster, it is still satisfying in the long term, especially when he fights a whole bunch of monsters. It's just so fun to see this force of nature go against other forces and just sort of come out on top. And yet, when we watch the first film, when you watch films like Minus One, you're reminded, oh yeah, actually means something. He's supposed to be an allegory for the threat that nuclear war possesses. And at nowhere, the fact that the American films are so heavily focused on him fighting other monsters, it's a testament to the fact that Godzilla is very much Japanese, because no people on the face of the earth fear the wrath of nuclear warfare more than the Japanese, I feel, because they're the ones who have actually experienced its effects. And I feel like that's so um, fascinating. It's such an interesting part of their culture now, and it's like, wow, that's just again, how is Minus One so freaking good? I don't know.
no, they did a fantastic job with making it work. And again, they made literally like again, this is all we kept saying. This is a Godzilla movie. Is that they were able to be like, hey guys, Godzilla's gonna, oh no, there goes Tokyo, guys. Godzilla's at it again with a purple soul grimace and terrible grin or whatever it says. He's gonna go in there and just destroy Tokyo. But then the next second, it's like, holy shit, Godzilla's destroying a fucking city with fucking atomic breath that is literally causing like full blown nuclear explosions. Like holy shit! Like it really put it into perspective. Like the whole and I know that sounds kind of dumb, but it really did. Like it put into perspective the whole idea that like, look, this isn't just a big giant lizard that's gonna go fight a big old monkey or something like that. This is a huge, terrifying monster that is the creation of experiments and human interference that has led to its creation, and it's our own fucking fault. And the other thing that was interesting about the movie too is that it roped in like his origin. How like and something I read is that this is apparently like the first actual Godzilla like period piece movie because it's set solely in the 1940s. It doesn't like flash forward to like 2014 or the present or something. It stays in the past, which I like. I can really appreciate. But what's interesting is that they rope in like the Bikini Atolls and how they did the testing on Godzilla there and how they changed him, and they really highlighted the whole fact that like, hey, you know, America is not going to take responsibility for this. They're too busy with other shit. They're not going to come in and help these guys. They're on their own. But then the Japanese government's also like, well, we don't want to tell everybody to panic because of Godzilla, so we're just going to cover it up. It just it was a fantastic commentary while also being a good monster movie.
And not to mention, as Godzilla films go, this is a pretty simple one. Godzilla going on a rampage and just doing one major atomic breath ray and blowing up a city. That's all pretty simple because, and I find that fascinating because throughout the decades, Godzilla films have always had a tendency to try to one up each other. They introduce a new monster, the new threat, or just introduce bigger and bigger action films. Like at one point in 2004, Godzilla Final Wars came about. The main threat is like a giant meteor, and Godzilla releases like a big old atomic breath scene that destroys all of Sendai, and all of Sendai. I'm just saying, and uh, again, you have a film with that kind of cataclysmic stakes, and then you have a film like this, which is really, really simple at its core, that is just Godzilla destroying a city, and yet it works so well.
There's an actual impact to it too. There's a real impact that you feel because they talk about like 30,000 people are dead. They don't be like, 30,000 people are dead. Let's go get them, boys. They're like 30,000 people are dead. Like actual people died, and you see the destruction. It's not just like random explosions where he's gonna go take a nice little walk down Honolulu International Airport or whatever or something like that. It's literally like you see this whole like city just get blown apart. Everything gets sucked into the explosion and blown back and sucked in and blown back, and it's just crazy. And it was also interesting to see how they roped in like the other characters. Like each character felt like they belonged to the movie. Like as much as like I enjoy the 2014 Godzilla film, just from a purely entertainment standpoint, some of the characters did not feel like they really belonged or had a purpose in that movie. Like Scarlet Witch, she could have been Elizabeth Olsen's character could have been so much, more fleshed out. I think same with Walter White, Bryan Cranston's character. He could have added so much more to the story, but they just cut him really fast, and it felt like they could have done more there. And here, like, you had the captain, you had the kid, you had the doctor. Everybody had a role to play. Everybody was doing something. And I think we're already in spoiler territory, but just in case you are, we probably already spoiled enough. But um, there's a great scene where they're dragging Godzilla up and the chain breaks, and then the kid comes in with all these tugboats from Japan, all these people coming together to beat this threat that is threatening their town, their city, their country. It just really stands out. It is great.
The stakes in this film feel very, very personal. And that's something that's very hard to get in a big kaiju monster movie because, you focus on the action, you focus a lot on the capabilities of destruction because it's more of a spectacle. But here, it's a tragedy. And the film very much treats it like that. And that in turn makes the conflict feel a lot more personable. And that's something that I very much appreciate as a
Yeah.
Godzilla fan. And keep in mind, Godzilla fans are typically pretty easily satisfied. All we really want to see is fun action and fun monsters, and if we're lucky, we have human conflict on this kind of scale. But so the simple fact is, they did not need to try this hard uh, with this film, and yet they did, and I appreciate them so much for it because you see them during their Oscar acceptance moments, and they're carrying their toys, and they're just having so much fun. They're answering their favorite films. It's films like Back to the Future. And you can tell they're just big dorks and they have so much fun making this as intense and as impactful as possible. It's just so well done. And from the bottom of my heart, as a big kaiju fan, let me just say thank you so much, guys. You guys, your work is so recognized and it is so very, very much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, look, I remember when like it got nominated, and there was a video of the whole crew, and they were so excited. They were like cheering and everything, and just like the funny, I remember when the Oscars were happening, literally half of the fandom I saw was just like, look, we don't care what wins, we don't care who comes out on top. Just give fucking Godzilla an award, guys. Just let him win. Let him win. And I love that there was like, I love the memes. Like Matt was talking about this earlier that like it's literally one of the least toxic fandoms out there for the most part. They're not gonna be like Matt. I think you said it best. Like they're not gonna like be attacking people or something.
Yeah. What I was said was when was the last time you ever heard Godzilla fans attacking a person for talking about spoilers as they leave the theater? When was the last time you heard about them bullying an actor off of Twitter or calling something woke? That's what I said earlier. So just Keep that in mind for this fandom.
Yeah. And it's like literally there were these memes of like, hey guys, like how are they gonna get Godzilla into the theater to give his acceptance speech? And like people being like, and now we have a word from our Academy Award winner. It was just like the big giant roar, like as like his speech, and like it made me smile because you can tell that like everybody has such a love for this movie. And Matt was saying like even the directors and the filmmakers like most people when they win an award, they go up there and they take it and they're just like, thank you, I'm so happy, and it's just them. These guys literally had shoes that were styled after like Godzilla's like scales and everything, and they had like tiny little Godzilla figurines that they brought up with them, and they were just they're giant nerds. And that's just what makes you happy is when you see people who love what they're doing and are passionate about what they're doing really play into it and really get a chance to shine with it. And that really also stood out with the visual effects. The visual effects, I mean, that's what it won the Academy Award for. But the visual effects in this movie were just phenomenal. I remember we were watching like uh, we were watching the awards for it, and first of all, Danny DeVito and Arnold did a great little bit at the start. I think everyone knows about Batman and everything. That was just hilarious. But then they showed like each of the visual effects winners, and it had like the creator where they just tossed in some extra buildings and explosion, and Guardians of the Galaxy where they were just on a blue screen, or Napoleon where they did some wonky things with a ship, and then it had like Godzilla, and Godzilla was literally like they literally like green screened him in, they green screened in the city, and they green screened in everything except for the people on the rooftop. The people on the rooftop were the only thing that were real. Everything else they just did. And it looked really good too. He looked menacing. He looked really good.
Yeah, this is honestly one of my favorite Godzilla designs, even knowing he's a lot shorter than some of the others. He's height wise, I think he comes up to like 2014's thigh, maybe, because they always got to go bigger and bigger with those. But nonetheless, this is one of my favorite Godzilla designs, and the way he looks is honestly so intense. You can see like every individual scale and gill and every single thing that just come out of this monster, and it feels so real. And ironically enough, it's one of the few Godzillas that's actually not real, because more often than not, Godzilla in the past they just used rubber suits, right? They didn't have a CGI; it wasn't quite there yet, so they utilized a whole lot of rubber suits and rubbermation. They utilized low camera angles or just like dead high crane shots or whatever to make Godzilla look as big as possible, as well as good miniatures to hide the fact it's just a guy in a rubber suit. And yet, the technology here brought Godzilla to life in a way that I don't think has ever been done before. This feels like the most alive Godzilla, and it's not even real. And I just very much appreciate that.
I even commented that it almost looked like a combination of CGI and also just like the rubber suit. It legit looked like they were trying to like emulate the rubber suit, but also make it look like realistic, if that makes sense. And they did a great job with it. Like someone else commented, like the eyes, his eyes looked like really human, which was also
Mm-hmm.
terrifying to think about. Is that like his eyes? Like I don't think he blinked. Like they didn't make him blink like once in that movie. He was literally just like this soulless stare, like staring into the city and like staring it down and getting ready to destroy. He was literally like a force of nature in this film. Plus, like the deeper you like, they throw a they throw a mine into his mouth. They shoot it and it blows his mouth apart, and then it just regenerates like instantly. And then more to that, just the whole fact that like the deeper you get into the movie, the more battle damaged his face and his body becomes. He's scarred. He's like burnt. He's all this different stuff, and he keeps like coming at you. He keeps coming forward, and it just worked really well.
Not to mention his roar is recycled from the 1954 version, and yet it comes across incredibly menacing. Like it's just like I wish we saw this in the theaters when it was here, because it was only here for like what, 2 weeks,
It
three
wasn't
weeks around
here.
that.
I remember I was traveling. I was driving across the U.S. and I saw it when I stopped in some towns, and I was like, maybe I should see it, but I just didn't have time. But I would have loved to have seen this in theaters because I can't imagine like an IMAX that roar. That would have been amazing to hear.
Hmm.
Plus,
That
like,
that's what I'm
yeah,
saying.
yeah. Plus, Matt pointed this out the other day is that the scales. Somebody said that the scales when he's like charging up for his atomic breath, it's almost like rods in a nuclear reactor. like how they shoot out and then they shoot back in and everything before he blows.
Keep in mind, we've had creative Godzilla breath effects before. In 2016, we had Shin Godzilla, which is a way of saying true Godzilla. The creature came across incredibly bloody. It looked like it was in really a whole lot of pain. Uh, his fire effect, for one thing, he had little black reflective eyelids that closed whenever he was about to do it. His jaw split open like Predator's. Yeah. And it was like a big laser beam, a really thin, narrow laser beam that I found very interesting. And so we've had creative effects before. And not to mention, it came out of his spines and his back and his little tail. It came out of a whole lot of places on top of his mouth. And that's saying that sounds really weird, I know, but just roll with me on this. That was probably one of the most creative fire effects for Godzilla's heat beam. I believe how many ways I'm describing this. But this one feels so much more intense, and yet it's so simple. Like you just feel that devastation it unleashes, you know?
Thank you, IGN. No, I'm kidding. You just feel like you're in the middle of a Godzilla movie. No, he has the exaggerated swagger of Godzilla. No,
I
but in all seriousness, like, yeah, you're not wrong that like the blasts were actually cool. They actually had an impact. It actually felt like, when he charged up, you could feel like terror. And something else that added to that is the freaking music that they used. Like they used the classic Godzilla music. Matt, like, we're watching and Matt is like freaking out, like they're using the music. They're using the Godzilla music. Which isn't a bad thing. He just was like, and I was like, wait, that's actually the Godzilla, like, because full disclaimer, I've actually never seen the original. Yeah, I've never seen the original Godzilla. I kept hearing that song. I was like, oh, cool. That's the -1 theme. So I feel so like, you know, uncultured in the sense that I don't know that that's the original Godzilla theme. But I like that they used that. But then there were some scenes where like you'd hear the music and it almost would sound like a siren, like an air raid siren or something, like growing and growing, and it just was like had a great effect on the movie.
Yes, that was in fact they did in fact use a lot of the classic Godzilla music. The do 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 do.
And
Those
then
that
also
music is used
the
across so many of his films, not just the original one. Like I don't even think it was in the original one, but uh, that's just like it's such a classic staple of the franchise. I'm so grateful that they use that. And again, it's just it shows that how much of Godzilla nerds these guys are, and I just
yeah,
love them so much for it.
they also use like the whole bum bum bum
Bum
bum.
bum bum
Yeah, that
boom
whole thing.
boom boom. I love
Yeah,
that song.
it just added to it so much. And like again, he's not in the movie that much. He only had like 20 minutes of screen time and like a 2-hour movie. But whenever he is on the screen, he like just adds to it. Like you feel his presence and you also just feel him in the movie. He's Jaws. He's a huge version of Jaws, just floating around the ocean, getting ready to strike whenever, and it just added such great bits to the movie and to everything. So that I mean,
Take another Godzilla film that actually had him lessen that Godzilla 2014, which he talked about earlier. Uh, that was actually one of the detriments of the film. It didn't feel like a Godzilla film because he was barely in it. But here, when he is present, it makes his presence so well known and it feels so intense. They don't cut away from the action to show whatever human things.
people screaming and running and all that crap.
It doesn't cut away from the devastation that he's about to cause. They just show it. They have fun. They utilize every bit of screen time that he has to their advantage, and I appreciate that very much. And in 2014, his absence is a lot more felt because while he does have some cool moments there, the more of the focus is on the boring ass humans. And again, normally kaiju fans are fine with the human conflict taking center stage, but it has to be really interesting to really justify not spending time with Godzilla. So here, the human conflict is so intense and emotional that it justifies having Godzilla's limited appearances. You know,
I mean, I want to see the relationship between Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch really play out. I don't actually. Please don't quote me on that. I never want to envision that ever again. Um, but
we already had that in the Ultimate comics.
that's fair. We already talked about that too. But
Yeah.
it just kind of like, look, I'm a fan of the 2014 one. I enjoy it. But I will say this blows it out of the water every sense of the word with what they do. Because I think that what really sells it too is that for half of the 2014 one, you're with other monsters. You're with the Mutos. You're with other people. You don't actually spend time with Godzilla in a movie called Godzilla. Whereas this movie, Godzilla was the only monster. He was the only thing that was present, and that is what made the impact. Is that you're kind of like, okay, he's out there. What's going on with the human characters? When is Godzilla going to show? It wasn't like a matter of when is Godzilla going to show up? When are we going to see the big lizard? We want to see the big lizard. It was more of when is that big lizard going to show up and what the fuck is he going to do? It was more like the sense of terror. And they did a great job of making you like connect with the people and that sort of thing. I mean, the only bad thing I can really say about this movie, it's not even a bad thing, was the and this is on us. We really should have watched it with the Japanese original audio, but we watched it in the dubbed, partly because made it feel more like the original movie. Matt said, not in a bad way, just made it feel more because Matt was this this was Matt's idea, and I went all with it because Matt's
I
the
mean,
big Godzilla fan.
I will just say the dubbing here is a bit awkward in some places, is the main point he's making. But again, that's a dub. It's what you expect. And honestly, compared to the films that came out throughout the 90s, it is nowhere near that awkward or silly. So I'm just saying that.
It also is not as like there was a point in the movie where like the main character is like turned away and you can't see his face, but they ADR'd it. And I was like, see, Madam Web, that's how you do ADR. And like it just was, it was like the one thing I would nitpick. And it's like that's all you can do with this movie is all you can do is nitpick. All you can do is be like, yeah, this movie just has like some very, very tiny, minuscule flaws and nothing else. Like it's just such a good movie.
I genuinely want to see the how it should have ended for this film because I genuinely don't think they're going to be able to do that much because
I can't.
this film ended pretty perfectly, honestly.
I want to see the honest trailer. I want to see their reaction to it. I seriously do. I want to see what they have to say about it.
Yeah. So overall, film is a whole lot of fun, and not to mention, it doesn't really need a sequel, and yet it still has an interesting route to take if they want to, because the ending of this film, which were huge spoilers up ahead. If you don't want to be spoiled, skip away. Skip away. Give you a second. Five, four,
Go
three,
back to
two,
George Miller
one.
or to X-Men or Madam Web.
Okay, spoilers. Okay, here we go. It actually has the potential to tease Biollante, which is a very underrated Godzilla villain. So one of the characters is shown to have a mark on her neck at the end of the film. The directors said this is Godzilla's cells. Now, the story of Biollante, as I have told Drew, the story is that a geneticist in 1989 took some of Godzilla's cells and spliced them with that of a rose and that of his deceased daughter. The result created a huge, gigantic monster that looked like a giant rose, and then eventually into a giant crocodile, looking like Little Shop of Horrors. So if they went that route with the sequel, that would be freaking mind blowing. Like holy shit, you would tap into the human tragedy of genetic experimentation, and you would also make the conflict so personal for Yoichi himself. So I just feel there is a whole lot of potential for a sequel if they want to go that route.
Not only that, but I just realized they could basically make it an allegory for radiation poisoning,
Hmm.
which would also be insane if they were like, and they can make it more realistic too, like not necessarily like a giant like Biolante, but just make it like I don't know something along the lines of radiation. They'll probably go with the giant monster because giant monster, but it's just
I don't. I genuinely don't know. These people are
yeah
talented. I don't want to
yeah
downplay their skills like that.
no we
Honestly.
don't. And the other thing that was cool about it too was just the whole fact like when it ends, they go back into the ocean where Godzilla's been blown up. And it focuses on his like chunks of his body, and it starts to regenerate, and then you hear the ba ba ba
Dun, dun,
ba,
dun, dun.
and it's like he ain't gone yet, baby. He coming back. So,
No one's
but
ever really gone.
no, yeah, I would really like to see them do a sequel, and I think that they could nail a sequel. They said that if they ever were going to do a sequel, they'd want Toho to take time with it. They don't just want it to be rushed. They don't want it to just be a messy movie. They want to take their time. They want to do it right, and that makes sense. Yeah, I definitely think that like this movie really hit hit everything where it needed to. And I don't know if like Matt really has anything else to say, but for me, like I would definitely give this like I give this an 11 out of 10 just because, -1. So that would bring it back to 10 out of 10. So solid 10 out of 10 for this movie. And also, one last thing I'll add, the reason why it's called -1, which is also really good and speaks to like the the effectiveness of this movie and being an allegory for post-war, is that basically they're saying like, Japan is already at zero because of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this sends it into the negative. And it was literally a tagline for the movie. One of the taglines was, Japan goes in and hold on, I'm gonna look it up in a second. I'm just Googling her. It was like send this will send like you know now they're going into the negative, like not nothing cheesy like now they're going into the negatives or something like that. It was actually like this will send them into the something. I'm butchering it, but I'm just trying to find. I'm trying to find. And it could be wrong, but yeah, again, the whole idea that they were just like this is legit going to be a Godzilla movie that focuses on like post-war trauma and PTSD and all that, it just speaks to the strengths of the movie. So
Yes. So, really quickly, fun little fact: if you translate all of the letters in Godzilla's name into a numerical code, you add all them up, the result is 86. So, Godzilla -1, the answer is 85. So, just wanted to throw that out there.
yeah. The other thing too is that people have come out and people have basically said, like, literally, Christopher Nolan, who made Oppenheimer, was like, this movie's fantastic. And then the guy who made 2014 Godzilla, Gareth Edwards, he said, I'm jealous because this is what a Godzilla movie should be. And he said, this is probably a candidate for the best Godzilla movie ever made. And then I remember seeing that, like, Spielberg. I think Spielberg even came out and was like this. Yeah, he said this movie, he's obsessed with it. And I think he even like met with the director and like praised him for his work and everything. It was like a dream come true for the guy, which is fantastic. And it's just again, Godzilla's now an Academy Award winner, baby. So he definitely deserved it.
Very well earned. I will give this film solid 10 out of 10 across the board in every aspect. I genuinely can't think of a single reason to dislike this film. And keep in mind, as a big kaiju fan myself, you might think I'm a bit biased, and maybe I am, but I can tell you makes a bad Godzilla film, and all that. But for this film, I can safely say this is one of, if not the best Godzilla film ever made. And if it is up there with the first one, it's just tied for being the best. So
Mhm.
definite recommend on both of our ends. Huge thumbs up for us. I love this film so much.
Yeah, and hopefully it gets a sequel. Again, the quote is that the producer of the movie believes that Toho is going to take their time to produce the next live action one because they want great ideas, a great script, a talented director, and the right cast to work on it carefully because Godzilla deserves to have that level of intentionality. And also, they're not sure like when they're going to end up doing it. The timeline will differ based on like when they end up doing the sequel. But hopefully we do get a sequel.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Again, if they do, I want them to take their time with it. I don't
Yeah.
want it to feel silly, you know?
Yeah.
Like people say, "Oh, Godzilla in this universe shouldn't fight another monster. That's not the point of this." But that's Godzilla as a whole. It's there's no like one point to be made. There's a whole lot of points.
Yeah.
That's what I should say.
I could see him fighting another monster if it's done right. If you do
Yes, me too.
Godzilla right, he can 100% fight another monster.
Yes,
So
absolutely. So I'll say, whatever they choose to do for the sequel, I'm gonna be 100% on board because these people haven't let me down yet. So I really, very much hope they do not let us down in the future.
hopefully, and I don't think they will, but I definitely think that that's where we're gonna cut it. And Matt and I are gonna get back to our fine dining experience and enjoy ourselves.
You'll,
Although
you'll check, sir.
oh, oh, I don't think we
Oh,
ordered the 1998 one.
yeah, yeah. Hey, pal, you got the wrong check here.
We should just go. Just skip out. What are they gonna do? Sing Godzilla after us? They probably will actually. So uh,
Speak. I think you spoke too soon. Look out the window.
Oh no, there goes Tokyo. Go go Godzilla.